And that whole brouhaha contributed to the removal of Section 13 from the Canadian Human Rights Act. It is a section which the federal Liberal government currently, through Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, is threatening to bring back.
Welcome to Episode 8 in the second season of Justice Centre Weekly, a video podcast from the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. I'm your host, Kevin Steele, and with us today is John Carpay, President and founder of the Centre. Today we'll discuss who's receiving the George Jonas Freedom Award in 2024 and why this man was chosen. We'll talk about high rates of school absenteeism, with fewer students attending classes than has been the case before lockdowns were imposed. And we'll talk about how nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers in Ontario and BC are prevented from working today in 2024 because of their decision in 2021 not to get injected with the COVID vaccine. So, John, who did the Board of Directors choose to receive the George Jonas Freedom Award this year?
Ezra Levant is the 2024 recipient of this prestigious award. It's named after George Jonas, who came to Canada in 1956, a remarkable man who had the misfortune, although he would say it was not necessarily misfortune because he believed that adversity in life could be a good thing. But he lived under both a fascist, anti-Semitic regime in Hungary during the Second World War, and he then lived under Stalinist communism. He hates both. He was a lifelong advocate for freedom. He was a poet, an author, and in the decades before his death, he was a columnist with the National Post. And George Jonas also played a key role in helping the Justice Centre to get off the ground in the early days of the Justice Centre's existence. So 2010, 2011, 12, 13, 14, George Jonas was on the board of directors of the Aurea Foundation, which no longer exists, but at the time gave some generous grants to the Justice Centre, which were really crucial in the formative years. So a refugee from communist Hungary and recipients. So George Jonas passed away in 2016, and this annual award was given in 2018 to Mark Stein, in 2019 to Christy Blatchford, National Post journalist. In 2020, it was given to the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship. In 2021, it was presented to Canadians resisting unconstitutional lockdowns. In 2022, it was given to Tamara Leach. 2023, Dr. Jordan Peterson. And 2024, Ezra Levant.
So why Ezra?
Ezra is a pioneer in independent media, which are even more crucial today, more important than ever before, because the media are corrupted by government funding. He who pays the piper calls the tune, and it's not just the CBC, but there's so many other media outlets are collecting taxpayers' money. They're not objective. They're not independent. And so Ezra's involvement with independent media goes back a long time. He started a magazine called The Western Standard. It is now still alive today as an online publication, but it was in print from 2004 to 2007. In 2015, Ezra started The Rebel, which has become very big, and journalists, reporters all over the world, and just crucially important in an era where so many other media, almost all of the media, are government funded and are not trustworthy. They have abandoned their ethics and their professionalism. Now, Ezra with The Rebel, as well as Andrew Lawton with True North and the Epoch Times, The Western Standard, people say that they are biased in a conservative or libertarian or right of center direction, and that's probably true that there's bias there. However, they don't pretend to be neutral, objective, lovers of truth who seek only to report on truth. And that's a big difference, because the government-funded media will still try to tell you with a straight face that they are truth-loving, truth-seeking, truth-telling, when that's simply not the case.
Yeah, that's actually the history of media generally, especially newspapers. They would often, in the old days, declare what kind of paper they were down in the States, whether they were a Democrat paper or a Republican paper, and it was pretty obvious here in Canada in the years actually before I wasn't that conscious of the media, from what I understand. So yeah, that the fact that the independent media is making a declaration of their stance is nothing new. It's more the declaration of being, trustworthy and non-politically aligned that I find somewhat dishonest. And I think that's where the mainstream media is today. And kudos to Ezra for being such a standard bearer in that.
Absolutely. It's very important what he, as well as, again, other outlets as well, the Western Standard, the Epoch Times, the Counter Signal, True North are some of the other ones alongside the Rebel. And it's so important what they're doing to inform the public and to present alternative viewpoints, which the government-funded media simply do not do. They've got one perspective, and they don't get quotes or opinions from a different side on issues. Now, two things stand out in particular with Ezra. One was his decision in 2006. There was a big international controversy. There was a Danish newspaper called Jyllands-Posten, and they had a contest, Draw the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam. They had a cartoon contest to draw Muhammad. And then they ran these cartoons. And this was very offensive to a large number of Muslims, or perhaps all practicing Muslims. Islam does not believe in or practice drawing. You don't have statues and paintings in Islam. That's against the rules. And you certainly do not do a picture of Muhammad. And that's considered to be blasphemous, or at least very offensive to a lot of Muslims. There were riots all over the world, and the media reported on the riots, but all around the world, none of the media were showing the cartoons. And so you couldn't see what the cartoons themselves, you could not see what the fuss was all about. And the media said, well, we're very respectful of religious people and their views, and we don't want to say something that is blasphemous and offensive to people because we just really respect religion. And that was disgustingly hypocritical. It was dishonest, because prior to 2006, whenever so-called artists, whenever there was anything blasphemous that Christians would find very offensive, the media always ran the photograph or the painting or the piece of art or so-called art. And they said, well, we understand this is deeply offensive to Christians, but, we're going to show you the photo of the crucifix submerged in a jar in a glass jar of urine. We're going to show you that photograph because that's what the story is all about. So it was just this disgusting double standard where up until 2006, the media always ran the painting, the photograph, whatever the controversy was. The media would show it, they would run it, and they would say, we don't care about the feelings of Christians who are offended by this, because we're just, neutral, we're courageous, bold truth tellers. Mm-hmm. And now you get these Muhammad cartoons, and all of a sudden the media all over the world said, oh, well, we're very respectful of religions and religious people and religious feelings, and we can tell the story without showing these cartoons. And it was a disgusting double standard. And Ezra Levant ran the cartoons in the Western Standard. So that was heroic and courageous, and it was necessary. Notwithstanding the fact, I understand it was offensive to Muslims, and they didn't want the Western Standard to run it. But it was important for somebody to stand up against this media double standard.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I was involved in that, working for the Western Standard at the time. And yeah, I remember it quite well. So I remember that controversy. And that was, I think, Ezra's high point in tackling a controversy, because he was charged with a hate crime at the Alberta Human Rights Commission, and he fought that quite valiantly, pretty much all on his own. So yeah, he deserves credit for that.
If you Google Ezra Levant, Alberta Human Rights Commission, 2008, even without the 2008, there are videos there that are worth viewing, and I believe that some of these were tacked onto a recent podcast, but they're easy to find. Ezra Levant, Alberta Human Rights Commission, and he confronts this inquisitor and takes a very principled and appropriately aggressive stance in favor of free expression, and says, you have no business telling me what I can and cannot say. And they were responding to a complaint filed by a Muslim against Ezra Levant and the Western Standard over running these cartoons. And Ezra defended himself. The complaint was eventually withdrawn. And that whole brouhaha contributed to the removal of Section 13 from the Canadian Human Rights Act. It is a section which the federal Liberal government currently, through Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, is threatening to bring back. And this was a provision that just wreaked havoc by prosecuting Canadians over non-criminal speech deemed to be hateful by unaccountable bureaucrats. And Ezra Levant and Mark Stein together played a key role in seeing to it that that section was repealed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our first winner and our current winner, definitely. Anything else you want to highlight of Ezra's career?
Well, he and the Rebel are also fighting a federal policy that would see governments having increased powers to officially designate who is or is not a journalist. That is a power that's going to be used against independent media like True North and the Rebel and the Epoch Times and the Western Standard. And so kudos to Ezra and the Rebel for fighting against that in a court action as well. So a very worthy recipient of this award. I've had a few queries, what about this and that? Ezra's made some errors in judgment in his life. He's been sued for defamation. He's sued other people. I would say that people that have never made mistakes are also the people that have never achieved anything in life, and great people throughout history. And I think Ezra is one of those. Are people that do make mistakes, but they pick themselves back up and they keep on going. And I think that Ezra is a very worthy recipient, and I'm glad that our board of directors has chosen him.
Great, and I look forward to those dinners where he's going to be celebrated. I think there's 3 across the country. You just want to plug those quickly, John?
I do for sure. The first dinner is coming up in June in Toronto. And that's going to be on Thursday, June the 13th. Save the date if you are in Toronto or if you want to travel to Toronto for Thursday the 13th. The hotel prices will be in the middle of the week. It'll be less expensive than on a weekend. And the next dinner is in Vancouver, also on a Thursday, August the 15th. So if you do not live in or near Vancouver, but you want to include the dinner as part of your holiday plans, you can, again, Thursday evening dinner will be held in Vancouver on August the 15th. And then last but not least, on Ezra's home turf in Calgary, where he grew up, the third and final dinner is going to be Friday, September the 27th in Calgary. And so three fantastic dinners, and you can visit www.jccf.ca and buy your tickets.
Yeah, I can vouch for those dinners being quite a nice night out. And let me tell you about Alberta, weather is good there in the fall. So yeah, it'll be a nice September night, I hope. And I look forward to it. Okay, so let's move on now, John. I want to talk a little bit about some of the work you've been doing. You wrote a column recently about school absenteeism. I just want you to remark a little bit on that. Something you've observed, and I think others are starting to notice it now too, because it's articles are appearing about this happening around the world.
So in late March, the CBC did an article on how the rates of school absenteeism, chronic absenteeism is defined as a student who misses 2 full days per month. So that's 10%, because you've got about 20 school days per month, considering, statutory holidays and whatnot. So chronic absenteeism, so missing 2 full days or more per month, those rates are higher than ever before, and they're higher than they were in 2019. And to its credit, actually, the CBC article does cite the lockdowns as one of the causes. They say, look, people got used to this idea that you don't need to be in class, you can be at home. There are a lot of parents who came to the conclusion that children needed a lot less than 25 hours of classroom time. Of course, there are different opinions on this, but a lot of parents were forced into homeschooling and looked at the amount of curriculum, the amount of content that the kids had to learn, and said, wow, that's taking, you're at school 30 hours a week for that. So it changed attitudes. Rates of homeschooling went up permanently, or appears to be permanently. And there's the old saying, actions speak louder than words. When you've got the politicians telling students, you don't need to be in class, you can learn from home, you can learn from behind a computer screen. Once that's been practiced, and it was practiced for a long time, for the better part of 2 school years, on and off and on and off and on and off, schools open and closed and open and closed and open and closed. But there were big chunks of time when students were not in class. And so they were effectively told by politicians and health officials, supported by the teachers' unions. I'm not aware of any teachers' union in Canada that was advocating for schools to remain open. And so why be surprised that you've got ongoing consequences that are still around today?
Yeah, actually, I want to remark, because I was doing a little research on this, and it looks like some school unions some teachers' unions were actively advocating schools stay closed. So, yeah, they were very much in support. A lot of them were very much in support of the closures. And now we're finding out that actually harmed children. So that's something that they haven't answered for yet. I don't know whether the public's going to take them to account directly, but I know that, there was a lot of exposure of the curriculum to parents that is causing blowback now. So there's all kinds of repercussions coming down the pipe because of those COVID closures. And, the rise in absenteeism is definitely one of them. So
the CBC article quotes at great length from a child psychologist, Dr. Maria Rogers, who is at Carleton University. And Dr. Rogers asserts that the school attendance is really important for kids to learn social skills and to experience feelings of connection and well-being. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but she says that it increases the bonds between teachers and students. It enhances learning, and it's important not just academically, but for the mental health, psychological health, emotional well-being of children, that it's part of laying the foundation for healthy adulthood. And that's what I describe as the gist of what she said. And it's refreshing to see the CBC report on, what is arguably a lockdown harm. And I know it's a complicated issue, because people will also point out that public education harms children. when they're telling 5-year-old boys that you might not really be a boy, you might actually be a girl, and you should investigate and explore that. Okay, that's harmful to kids to push out this propaganda that telling girls that girls are not real and girls don't exist, and you might not be a girl. This kind of garbage. And the curriculum is so flawed. I mean, there is very little history that is taught. And when a person who doesn't know anything about history is a person that you can persuade of anything, because there's no grounding. There's no context. There's no background. So the whole topic of public education is a mixed bag. But I would agree with Dr. Rogers that the prolonged school closures are very likely to have been harmful to at least some kids and probably a lot of kids.
Yeah, I would say the abruptness of that as well. I mean, you could do these things and there are homeschooling solutions and a lot of people do it successfully. But the way it was abruptly done, I think disrupted a lot of people's lives and a lot of children's lives, obviously. So this is another example of a lockdown harm that the government-funded media didn't talk about it too much. It's like, oh, well, yeah, it's an inconvenience. A single mom can't go to work now because she's got to suddenly homeschool the kids who are, in the, let's say, ages 6 to 12, grades 1 to 6, grades 1 to 7, that are not yet old enough to be home alone. So mom's got to, quit her job or maybe lose her job to suddenly be home with elementary school kids who are not old enough to be home alone. The media just everything was just an inconvenience because we're on this crusade to save lives, even though in all the court rulings that I have read over the last 2 years, I've yet to see a government that presented any persuasive evidence in court that demonstrates that lockdown saved lives. Lots of wishful thinking, lots of assertions, but no evidence. Yeah, lots of preventative principles or whatever they had, but no real evidence to support it, even though there's a growing body now of evidence to contradict that.
We knew at the time that children were as likely to die of COVID as they were to die of lightning strikes. That was, that's not hindsight. That's at the relevant time. We had that initial fear-mongering in March of 2020, where Dr. Neil Ferguson of Imperial College said that COVID would be as deadly as the Spanish flu of 1918. That the World Health Organization said the fatality rate was 3.4%, which is just astronomically false, completely, totally overblown. And we knew early on, by April, May, June, it was clear that COVID was not, yes, it was a serious threat to older people with comorbidities, but it was not a threat to 90% of the population. We knew that, and yet we still closed the schools and we kept them closed on and off for the better part of 2 years. So shame on us.
Yeah. Yeah, and that moves us on to, I guess, our second column we want to talk about here, because that was about something that should have been or tried to be a solution to that, and this was the vaccine. Your column appeared in the Western Standard on April 3rd, and it was titled, 2 years later, Ontario and BC medics still need vaccination proof. This one was interesting because it got a lot of good reception on social media, with lots of retweets and likes. I was following that particular one. Tell us a little bit about that story.
So the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, and by the way, thank you to all of our viewers and listeners who are donating. We rely 100% on voluntary donations from Canadians. So if you have never donated or have not donated recently, go to www.jccf.ca, and we are a registered charity. We'll get you an official tax receipt, and please do your part to defend freedom in Canada and support our team of lawyers and paralegals and communication staff that are fighting for your rights and freedoms every day. So the Justice Centre, one of the court actions supported by us is in British Columbia. It's called TATLOW, TATLOW. and it was argued in December of 2023. We are awaiting a decision from the Supreme Court of British Columbia, and this is a court action on behalf of nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers, including administrators. In some cases, people working from home, fired for not getting injected with the COVID vaccine. Now, people tout that as medically necessary and a life-saving measure, etc. Well, first of all, the whole thing is based on the false claim of Neil Ferguson that COVID is an unusually deadly killer, which by the time vaccines became mandatory in September of 2021, this is a year and a half into COVID, and anybody who could, pry their eyes away from government-funded CBC or other media and actually look at the government's own death stats would know by September of 2021 that no, COVID was not an unusually deadly killer. It was not on par with the Spanish flu of 1918. The initial predictions were false, and they've been thoroughly discredited. So that alone is a reason why you don't have mandatory vaccinations when you're not dealing with a virus that is, yes, it's a deadly killer, but it's not an unusually deadly killer. It is in the same range with other flus in the past 100 years. And but secondarily, even if that was not true, even if COVID was an unusually deadly killer, there is no evidence in September of 2021 that getting injected with the COVID vaccine would stop the spread of the virus. There's no evidence at that time when they made it mandatory. A few months later, by Christmas of 2021, it was very clear this vaccine did not stop the spread. You had countries like Gibraltar, 97% injected. You had Israel, more than 90% of people injected. All these countries with super high vaccination rates, and the Delta variant, Omicron, they all spread everywhere. So the vaccine did not stop the spread. That being a fact, why should it be necessary for somebody to get injected when it was clear that the vaccine did not stop the spread? So there's no medical...
Yeah, necessary to the point where they would lose their job if they didn't do it. And in the medical field, where there are chronic shortages of doctors and nurses, medical professionals of all types.
Well, in British Columbia, some reports suggest that it's 20% of the population in BC that does not have their own family physician. A fifth of the population of British Columbia, reportedly, and I stand to be corrected on this, if it's not a fifth, it's a large number of people in any event, with even if it's 15%, 10% of the people that have to go into a walk-in clinic, which is not the end of the world. It's better than nothing. But I think everybody recognizes you're better off with your own family doctor who knows you, as opposed to not having your own family doctor and being always reliant on a walk-in clinic where, the doctor may never have seen you before. Mm-hmm. So that's healthcare in BC. They are understaffed. They're trying to recruit from outside of BC, but they refuse to hire back people that live in BC, that are qualified, that are trained. These people are not being hired back. Why? Because they didn't get injected in 2021, and they don't want to get injected now. And why should they? Why should they get injected in 2024 with a vaccine where we still don't have long-term safety data on the vaccine, and there are disconcerting preliminary indicators that are cause for concern. Let's just leave it at that.
I think on social media, the excerpt that was put up was just 3 paragraphs, the short paragraphs from near the beginning, and it finished with this one, and I think this is what resonated with people based on the retweets and the comments below. And it went like this, quote, "Is it ideology, or is it pure vindictiveness that would cause the BC and Ontario governments to prevent qualified healthcare professionals from working in 2024? Perhaps both? Where is the science?" Unquote. I think that resonated with people, especially when you talk about put in the word vindictiveness, and it does seem like there's something of that there, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, and in Ontario, likewise, the Ontario, I have talked to nurses, and some of these are public about their stories. Hospitals will not have nurses work there unless the nurse has been injected with COVID vaccine. Now, technically, that's not a government policy, so to speak. It's not coming from the health minister or the health ministry. Technically, it's a local decision of each hospital. However, bottom line is hospitals are government funded. They are government controlled. And it would be very easy for the Ontario health minister to inform the hospitals that starting tomorrow, you're dropping your vaccine passport and you're hiring trained and qualified nurses, and you're not going to continue to prevent people from working at the hospital because they didn't get a COVID vaccine 3 years ago. The health minister could solve that problem tomorrow if Ontario's health minister was so inclined. So I would say to listeners in Ontario, call your MPP and say, why are nurses prohibited from working in hospitals? And it's something that Ontario's health minister can fix tomorrow, and simply tell the hospitals that they're going to change their policies. That's his power. That's his authority. He shouldn't be afraid to use it in a situation like this.
Yes, I agree entirely. Okay, John, that's great. I want to thank you for coming on this episode of Justice Center Weekly and giving us that announcement. And I look forward to actually talking to you again, but also seeing you at those dinners.
And next week, I'm leaving. By the time this video comes out, I will be in Ottawa delivering over 50,000 petitions to the Prime Minister's office against the Online Harms Act. I anticipate we'll likely continue with the petition afterwards. Maybe this will just be the first 50,000 that are delivered. So sign that petition as well. If you cherish your freedom of expression and other rights and freedoms, go to our website and sign the petition against the Online Harms Act.
Great. Okay. We'll talk to you soon.